If you thought sewing was just this cute little hobby with no danger, no risk factor, nothing, you were wrong. I'm sure you've realized this already. Sewing can be quite dangerous. And in this video, let's talk through some of the dangers because the blood, sweat, and tears is real. And I want you to have less of this. Save yourself some of that blood, sweat, and tears so we can sew a little bit safer and get you through your projects safely. Welcome back, my sewing friends. It is always so lovely to see your smiling faces here. If you happen to be just brand new here, then welcome. My name's Evelyn Wood, and here on this channel we talk everything about garment sewing so you can get better at making the garments that you dream of in your mind. And so if you happen to be just starting on your sewing journey, then, well, I'm really sorry to be the one to tell you this, but all of these things will happen. Yeah, maybe not every single one, but they all will happen. It's part of sewing, and those of you that are a little bit more experienced like me, you can laugh along with me here because we have all done these things, all seen, experienced these things, or heard the horror stories of some of them. Sewing can be quite dangerous. As I said, the blood, sweat, tears is all real things that happen in sewing all the time. There's no getting away out of any of them, but we can minimize them because there are some things that we do that cause, let's say, a cause for danger that we can minimize and reduce our risk factor. So we are all here about sewing safely, and so let's talk through some of the main things that can happen and go wrong so you can maybe train yourself into better habits now so you don't get yourself in one of these dangerous situations. I'm almost scared to read the comments section at the end of this video because I fear there'll be lots of horror stories. I have my own sewing horror story at the end for you as well. One of the first dangers of sewing is when you try on your garments and they're all pinned. Ouch. We've all had those moments, right? You've got it all, the side seams are all pinned, everything's pinned, and you're trying to put on this thing that just has pins all over it, and ouch. I know I've heard many stories of people when they were young, like kids, and their mum would make them try on garments with pins, and they just like petrified of being poked by all the pins. I always laugh at those stories. Maybe that's you. How can we minimize this one? Well, I have a few tricks up my sleeve for you. That is, my first one is my very favorite, and that is the actual type of pin that you use. So ordinarily we use these pins here, these ones. I like to use these big, well, they're actually florist pins for fitting. You can see the size difference, right? And so I use these big long ones because basically you need about 2 or 3 of these little ones to make up one of these big ones. And so by having much fewer pins, I know they look big and scary, but you only really need a few. And so there's much less pins to actually poke yourself with. You're just reducing the numbers to start with. And then because they actually have a much longer grabbing distance, you can weave in and out. And by doing that, it holds in the fabric so much more than just simply up and in. So weaving it actually holds it in more. So you can reduce the risk of them falling off, and the number, you're halfway there already. Then the real big saver is to actually substitute these pins for safety pins, and obviously they lock in and the pointy end is all safe and secure inside the safety pin, and you can try it on risk-free. Needles breaking at the machine and possibly ending up in your eye or anywhere else. This one is one of those horror stories that you hear of people, the needle breaking and it flicking up at them. It'll probably happen to you at some point. I mean, you will break a needle. Often, like I've had them hit my face at times throughout my life. Scary. So what can we do to minimize this? Basically, it's when you're at the machine and your sewing machine needle hits something it shouldn't and breaks. Usually hits something it shouldn't. So sewing over pins, big no-no. Just don't do it. That's probably the biggest cause of this. So just don't sew over pins and you'll reduce your risk a lot. If you're sewing over really thick areas that often might be too much for your machine to handle, it'll break because your needle is trying to go down, but there's just not enough force and it obviously snaps. In those areas that you're a bit concerned with, use your hand wheel rather than the foot wheel to just hand wheel it down stitch by stitch, and you won't break it and it's not going to fling up in your eye anywhere. They're your two really ones at the machine. The other one is to, you know, if you have some glasses, wear some safety glasses if you're super concerned and just, I don't know, still have to go full speed running over your pins. Definitely safety goggles up, but just your eyeglasses can obviously stop any impacts there as well. What about pinning your finger instead of the fabric? So you know when you've got your fabric and your pin and then you're pinning it in and then ouch, you realize that you've got your finger instead of the fabric. Oh, I think this happens to all of us, and it will happen to you if it hasn't already. Usually you don't do anything too damaging, but you usually only just get a little bit of skin. So you can, you know, just minimize this by just trying to get a better system where you hold your fingers apart underneath and make sure you're always pinning in between your fingers is probably the best thing that you can really learn how to do. And just to make note of where all your fingers are, and sewing is a lot of needing dexterity in your fingers, so that's probably the biggest point to try and avoid that one. Of course, you could use things like the Wonder Clips or something like that, but they're not really great for all areas of sewing. So the rotary cutter. I have not ever used a rotary cutter myself, but gosh, have I heard some stories about the horrors of the rotary cutter. That's the round wheel that you use instead of scissors to cut out the fabric. Yeah, you're seeing what's happening here already. I'm not going to describe it. You can use your imagination. Be careful. Rotary cutters do have little safety blade guards, so you can use those to actually not cut yourself. In industry, when you use, well, say machinery, they actually have a mesh glove. So you could do something similar. Even just a wool glove will provide enough, I think, resistance on just a cutter like that. So wearing a glove on your other hand as you're doing it would definitely be what I would do to save yourself the trouble. Using those guards and just slowing down, I think, is very key, and taking note of what you're doing. But a wool glove, I think you'll find will be very useful. What about pricking yourself as you're maybe hand sewing and you end up bleeding over your garment? Yeah, I know. I used to work in bridal, and of course everything is white or ivory, or it's all white. And this would happen. I mean, it's inevitable. Everyone, if you're working on garments, you accidentally prick yourself and you start bleeding. It can be, it's not even a ratio, right? If you sometimes just literally touched yourself and all of a sudden it just is, it's not proportionate to the damage done a lot of the time. What do you do though? This is like, it's on the garment. And so what I learned back then is that first thing with any blood on a garment, no matter what color it is, you do not want it to dry on the garment. So the old saying of saliva straight away, yes. I know it seems a little bit gross, but trust me, only because saliva is generally the wettest thing that you have on hand immediately. If you happen to have a cup of water, that would be better. But generally a little bit of saliva just to keep it wet, and then that gives you enough time to get to the sink to wash it out. So just try and get that blood out instantly and don't let it dry. And it can dry very, very quickly, so be careful. So that old saliva trick actually has a little bit of truth to it. I used to put pins in my mouth all the time. Don't do it. Don't do it. There are so many horror stories of inhaling the pins, or you trip, or something scares you or shocks you, or just like something that you weren't thinking about, and yeah, you can inhale pins. I've read stories of people having to go to hospital, they found them a week later, or all sorts of awful things. It is a really bad habit. I'm totally guilty of this one. How I really broke the habit is to have a wrist pin cushion that is with me all of the time, and so it's really easy to put my pins here, pick them up when I need them, because you've always got one, and then you think, oh, what do I do? Oh, I'll just put it in my mouth. So eliminate the need for that altogether. Make yourself a pin cushion. I have a video here on YouTube. You can make one yourself all out of thrifted secondhand items. Really, really easy to do. This one could literally save your life. Stepping on pins on the floor. Yeah, so as a sewist, you will know that these pins are like bobby pins in your hair. They just disappear, right? And they generally are all on the floor. I remember when I was cleaning up my rooms through all my life, and even when I was a teenager sewing, and all the rooms I've had since then, when you try and clean up, there are pins embedded in that carpet and the flooring. Who knows how many? It is absolutely ridiculous. So my horror story of pins on the floor, you guessed it, yes, is coming right up now. So this is my worst story of sewing dangers. Is I was a teenager, still at home, hand sewing, Can't remember what garment because now that's not the highlight of the event. Hand sewing at the kitchen table. Excellent. And I sort of dropped my needle somewhere. It's like looking, okay. Put my feet down to get up, and you guessed it, my heel caught the end of the needle. But here's the real horror. It was thread side up. So then the eye was up inside my foot, and the thread was like hanging out of my foot underneath on my heel. Yeah, I know. I know. My dad had to get pliers and pull it out. Fortunately, it didn't hurt very much for what it was way more graphic and gruesome. For some, just must have missed all the nerves, but that is my absolute horror story. The worst thing that I think has happened in my sewing days, and I hope to never do that again. So what do I do now? Well, 1, wear shoes. That helps. 2, pincushion, magnetic pin trays, and just keeping track of your pins. When you do lose one, just make a note to always pick it up. It's just one of those habit things that when you build it as a habit, it's not so hard to do. But a few of those things will help stop them being everywhere on the floor, and will stop you from having that horror story that I did. But we all know the real danger of sewing, of course, is that it in fact takes over your life and over every single space that you have. You no longer have any room, any space, anything for anything, because you just keep accumulating all the sewing stuff, and this is your life now. That's the real danger of sewing. We all know this. I would love to hear your own dangers or more remedies for the dangers that you do, some habits that you've employed, or something that you have been able to do to not have any of these happen or stop them, because read those comments. There will be many good tips down there for you to sew a little bit safer, because we do not want too much, at least, blood, sweat and tears into your sewing projects, and we want to see definitely less of that first one. So leave all your comments in the comments below. Check the description box too, because I'm going to link up a bunch of different videos there that I think you'll really enjoy and will help you on your sewing journey also. Until next time, my sewing friends, happy sewing. Bye.